might be helpful in understanding different perceptions about truth and reality, the principles, practices, and perspectives, especially coming from, across the Atlantic. So we have said sometimes that this idea of truth and whatever might be culturally specific and culturally different, but there is something like truth. Like John Public said, the truth is real. No matter whatever we say, fact or fiction or falsehood or whatever. So we'll be listening to that. And Dr. Olga herself, okay, she's back. So I'm going to turn it over to her to continue the conversation along this line. And the minister, I understand, would like to make it as conversational as possible because he said he wouldn't want to just begin to read a speech, and I said that's good, so that we can share ideas from his own perspective and understand and ask questions. Imam Shamsi Ali just sent a message that he's running late. I don't know whether he's going to join us eventually, but I don't know whether Oliver Money is here. Okay, please, can you come to the high table? Of course, Olga Zbashkaya, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ichena, and
sit in the center.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Sit in the center.
Myself?
No, Olga. Sit in the center.
All right, so like Dr. Ichena said, my name is Olga Zbarska, and I'm not a journalist. I'm the president of Ask Rita Corporation. It's a center of creative thinking and unlimited possibilities. And my area of expertise includes creative thinking, decision making, problem solving, perception, emotional responses, based on cognition, and cognition is based on perception, as we know. So actually, all mental representations of reality are rooted in perception. That's why perception is so important in journalism and in our everyday life. So any information, as we know, is analyzed by the brain through the prism of expectations and probability based on our experience. Facts and figures can actually only take an argument thus far. And at a certain point, we decide how we feel about what statistics support. So much of truth relies on our ability to analyze details. So when details become conflicted, no one knows who or what to believe. And that's when the definition of truth becomes unclear. So personal experience from one point and cultural norms from another shape what we choose to believe. As we have said already earlier today, in 2016, the Oxford Dictionary selected post-truth as word of the year due to its dominance in the context of that year's political events. And post-truth politics is a political culture in which debate is framed largely by appeal to emotions. Again, back to perception, emotional responses, and then behavioral responses. So traditional methods of journalism are losing, as we said today, their influence with the emergence of new communication channels like personal blogs, instant messaging, social media networks, and so on and so on and so on. So this is why it's so important to learn the difference between a principle and an opinion. And speaking of globalization, just a few words. From one perspective, globalization liberates potential of establishing cross-cultural dialogue. But from another, it actually retains the oppressive potential to create a monoculture, but by ignoring, replacing, eliminating many important cultural concepts. So since the world has entered a post-truth era, science and principles are needed more than ever. And Albert Einstein once wrote, "It is entirely possible that behind the perception of our senses, worlds are hidden, of which we are unaware." And the more we learn, the more we understand. Different cultures have different interpretations of reality. And the more we become respectful of these cultures and these differences, the more possibilities of having meaningful dialogue among civilizations we get. So therefore, our honored panelists from different countries will analyze different concepts and practices of truth in the media and public sphere. So I would like to present to you our dear guests. It's Major General Kahinda Atafire, Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, Republic of Uganda.
I'm asked to talk about Mike. I'm asked to talk about a subject that's a bit complicated because it's in the realm of philosophy. And as the steward of justice and constitutional affairs, justice per se in Uganda, I would rather approach the subject from the practical point of reality. Reality which is hinged on the fact that I'm an African. I am an African because I happen to come from that continental shell called Africa. But specifically, I'm a Ugandan. And I'm a Ugandan because that's where I was accidentally born. It was not my choice, or it was a design. But I'm a human being. I'm a human being in that I belong to the human race. And because I belong to the human race, I also have quite a lot in common with the rest of human beings. What is sometimes difficult for us to discern is that the commonality of our biological ancestry puts us in a certain situation that is unique to the rest of creation. And yet, because of the historical development we've gone through, and because we've been living asunder, we've adopted certain platitudes and attitudes that put us at variance. And because we're at variance, we tend to see ourselves from certain perspectives generated by a narrative of echo chambers. Ugandans talk to themselves as Ugandans. Americans look at themselves as Americans. Russians look at themselves as Russians. And because of the historical development of mankind, separated by geography, we've tended to promote what divides us rather than our commonality of belonging to the human race. And that has been a source of conflict. And this source of conflict is generally a result of how to improve our situation on Earth as compared to other people. What do the other people have that promotes their welfare on Earth that we don't have? And how do we acquire what we don't have to the detriment of those who have? And that has resulted in war. Wars are nothing more than quest for resources, wealth, and influence. And influence is specifically for making me better than the other human being. Now, because I want to become better than the other human being, I see myself as a black person or a white person. And that's the genesis of our perceptions, which are racism, tribalism, religious conflict, ethnicity, sexism. You know, for instance, you laugh at in this room, how many of you can produce children? How many of you can give birth? Not me. None of us can give birth. So somebody has to give birth in order to to create, to make sure that there is what's the good word? Procreation of mankind. So men need women to procreate. Women need men to procreate as well. So there is that mutual relationship, mutual relationship. Then you find one of the two sexes thinks it's superior than the other when it cannot fulfill the biological functions of the other. You know, and this is what she was talking about, perceptions. Perceptions because men think they are stronger, they are superior, they are this. No, the muscular superiority of men is a result of the biological requirement to protect women and their offspring. Women have a beautiful voice, gentle hands, beautiful faces, because they rear the young. You can imagine if a baby was to wake up and find what I feel his face. You also look at me. The baby would die afraid. So that's why women are biologically gentler, because they have mammary glands, which we don't have. They have mammary glands, they are gentler, a soft voice, a beautiful face. All of these are biological requirements for procreation. And yet for us, who don't carry babies in our wombs, are supposed now to provide protection for these two, the one who is carrying our procreation. That's why we developed muscular, physique and all this, to use it to protect these two. Now, our perceptions are that we are superior, which is a fallacy. I'm now giving you this example to relate it to the different divisions we in the human race have adopted and generally exude, which defeats common sense. All of these defeat common sense. It's when we go back to common sense and the relative quest for each other's support that we see how far we've been blinded and have learned to negate each other's contribution in the quest to be better than the other person. And then we close it in religion, clan, tribe, and we think we are better than the other. Now, the history of Africa has been a victim of these unqualified attributes we have allocated to ourselves. In that you hear of African backwardness. Why are Africans backward? They are backward in relationship to other people in the world. And what is the relationship between the African people and other people in the world? It's an equal economic relationship. an equal economic relationship, in that we've suffered, we've endured the burden of extraction of value in exchange for no value. We've suffered extraction of value in exchange for no value. Take for instance when we first got in touch with, about 500-600 years ago, when we first got in touch with the then bourgeoising culture of primitive capital accumulation in Europe, which was, the crudest was slavery. Slavery was extraction of manpower from the African continent to Western Europe, North America, and then later on other areas. And at that time were almost at par technologically, because while the Africans were using spears, the Europeans were using muzzle loaders. Now, a muzzle loader rifle and a spear are almost at par, because by the time you load gunpowder and put a bullet, and this fellow will be, militarily at par with you. Now, when the process of extraction of manpower from Africa to the rest of the world took place, this manpower that was taken from Africa created wealth. This manpower created wealth elsewhere. And because they created wealth, it triggered the accelerated development, technological development of these other places where African manpower was taken. It was not only manpower, it was resources also. It was other resources, minerals, gold, what. Now, in exchange for trinkets. That's why I blame our ancestors, and I don't like the chiefs of Africa, because they were unable to defend our independence. Those big chiefs there, the ones we now glorify. I don't know, Oga, I don't know what, Kabaka, they were able to defend our independence. They concentrated on exchanging value for no value and triggered their unparalleled development of Western Europe, North America, and some other places later on. Now, this is what has created this imbalance, and that unequal trade has continued even after when we got independence in quotes. That unequal relationship, the extraction of raw material and providing market for finished industrial goods, and these days manpower, and modern day slavery, because now, while at that time it was necessary for traders to go and capture Africans, now the Africans are actually taking themselves to Europe. They are drowning in the sea. The Africans are now drowning in the sea, going for slavery to Europe. Right now it's going on. You don't have to go there to catch them. Now they are taking themselves. And that's a result. They are not taking themselves just because they are happy with being slaves, just because the unequal relationship of extraction of resources has continued unabated. And it's reached a situation of desperation that now people are running away from resource-rich Africa to resource-exhausted Europe. Europe is resource-exhausted, and Africa is still resource-rich. Why don't these African people stay on the continent and develop these resources? It's because technologically because of that economic relationship, we've remained backward. And we remain backward as a result of what she said, perception. Now, when you listen to the narrative, about the situation of Africa, it's very far from the truth. The narrative of the situation in Africa is different from the reality on the ground. The reality on the ground is what we, those of us who experience the aching of existence in Africa every day, and read what is being reported and taught in schools, and quoted as our history and the economic conditions, is different. Now, because this narrative is repeated time and time again, skewing the facts, divorcing them from reality, it has now become the truth. And also, now we even the Africans, have also been taught to accept it. Yeah? Like those of you who are Christians, time and again you've been told that when you are poor, you go to heaven. That when you are poor, you will go to heaven. That blessed are those who are poor. No poor person will go to heaven. You ask me why? Because poor people insult God every morning. Poor people insult God every morning when they wake up. Say, God, why don't you like me? God, why don't you like me? Excuse me, poor people, when they die and they arrive in heaven, if at all they do, He will tell them, what you the one who's insulting me down there. Now you're coming here to insult me here in heaven. Would that not make sense? That would make sense. But because we've been told that poor, only the poor, heaven has now been made a place of solace and refuge for the poor. Excuse me, now I want to enjoy my heaven on earth. Not when I go, no, here. Why are other people living comfortably? They are billionaires here in America. Billionaires living comfortably. Why should I bear poverty in Africa, believing that I will go to heaven? When a billionaire will also repent when they are going. They have enjoyed on earth, they will repent and say, sorry, I became very rich at the expense of the Africans, God forgive me, and I'm told they will be forgiven. So, the reality, I don't want to wander very far, but the reality of the narrative of the African situation, under the perception, and they are at variance, and we cannot change our situation unless we also align reality to the narrative and the perception. I don't know whether I'm understood. Have I made myself clear? Yes. So the truth, as she said, the reality of Africa, the history of Africa, the history of mankind, put together into proper perspective, will now cause universal development for mankind. The rest of mankind needs Africa, Africa needs the rest of mankind. So I appeal to you who look at these issues from a philosophical point of view, to tell mankind that even the Africans also deserve a place. They also deserve a place in the world, and they are part and parcel of creation, and everybody needs the other. Much more so now than before. Because if it doesn't happen, it's just a matter of time. Africa will cause the Third World War. It's a matter of time. Fortunately, I may not be here. I've had a lot of wars to fight in my lifetime. I may not be here, but I can see a situation developing where Africa will be the source of the Third World War.
Can we die out?
Yes. We are going to fight for water. We are going to fight for space. We are going to fight for clean air. Yeah. So, with those few words, ladies and gentlemen, I think I've come here to make a case for Africa, for us to be understood and put in a proper perspective. That's the truth. I thank you.
another panelist, and then we'll take your questions. So I would like to present you Al Vermoni, Global Communications Director, U.S. and International Communications, also International Rescue Committee, and also overseeing strategic communications planning, execution, and evaluation related to refugee resettlement programs in 28 U.S. cities and international programs in over 30 crisis-affected countries. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here, and it's very good to be following this discussion and those words from the Minister. I work for the International Rescue Committee. For those of you that don't know, the IRC was actually founded by Einstein, so it's very nice to hear him cited in Olga's remarks. We're a global humanitarian agency. We're in 30 countries around the world. We are very fortunate to be working in Uganda and have an excellent partnership with the Ugandan government and various international actors in the country and in the region. And per that introduction, we also work in 26 US cities where we resettle refugees here in the United States. And we provide humanitarian services and other kind of services to vulnerable groups here in the US. So that would include asylum seekers and other immigrants. I thought that it would be interesting to just present a couple of case studies through the lens of the IRC that speak to the topic of this discussion. One is Yemen, and the other is refugee resettlement and the way in which refugees are talked about around the world in relative and qualitative dissonance when you think about the numbers involved. So the first was that I wanted to talk about briefly was Yemen. I'm sure everyone here is well aware that for over 3 years now, Yemen has been at the absolute top of the list for international humanitarian crisis. I think last month, Lisa Grande at the UN said it could be facing the worst famine in 100 years. And tragically, it's a man-made famine. It's because of war, and folks will know that the actors there aren't just the Houthi group and the government, but it's a proxy conflict. And it's been ignored essentially for 3 years by the Western media. And now we're at the point where we have 12 million children on the brink of famine. So I wanted to kind of pose the question and try and answer it, why we started to talk about it now. And I think we know the reason we've started to talk about it now. It's because of the very devastating and sad murder of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi in Turkey. And one of the things that the IRC has been trying to do is to say, firstly, yes, that's an absolutely shocking event, and it's a tragedy that journalist was murdered, both the individual tragedy, but also he was a journalist, and so there are obviously human rights concerns. But it's only because of that that a lot of the newspapers here in America have started to give some space to the Yemen crisis in their pages. And what we've seen really is, as Yemen has become more of a strategic question and a strategic interest for US media, the humanitarian crisis there has been brought into much sharper focus. And whilst that's it's on one hand good, it's also not the reason, that's not why Americans should be caring about people in Yemen right now. So I wanted to just kind of raise that as an example of some of the perception issues that come across the International Rescue Committee's communications desk. We fight very hard for these humanitarian crises to be heard, and we try and use statistics, and we try and use stories, and we try and do what good consultants will tell us to grab the opinion of people. But it's not until there's a strategic political shift that it starts to get attention. One of the things that the IRC is doing about that is we've started to poll the American public, and we've started to release polls that show whether or not people are aware of these crises, whereabouts in the country they are for people who know about these crises. And we hand those polls over to the New York Times and others, and we try and get a bit of attention for it. but I'd be really interested to hear folks' reaction to this development and what they think about it. The second example I wanted to lift up, which speaks more to some of, I think, what the Minister was talking about, is the way in which the refugee crisis globally is understood and interpreted by the media. So there are a few examples that I wanted to bring out. The first is obviously the Central American caravans that were quite clearly, I think, raised by the US administration in the last few weeks as part of a political strategy. And I think you'll notice now that they're not talking about the caravans anymore. And I'd love to hear folks' views on why that might be. One of the statistics that we pulled out last week was the Washington Post put out a piece and said that it may end up costing the US government $200 million to move the troops down to the southern border, which they did during the midterm election cycle. We had a look at this and we found out that they spend less than half that on foreign aid to El Salvador every year. They took that $200 million that they spent on a troop deployment to a border where there were no caravans for the troops to meet. They took that $200 million, they could virtually treble the budget of their foreign assistance to El Salvador, and it's in El Salvador where there's violence, which is where people are fleeing. I think the caravan is a great example of a humanitarian crisis that is used by politicians and used by the media to push their own agendas, using some of these perception, truth, reality techniques in the press. The second example is terror attacks. You will have seen definitely in the American campaigning for the presidency and in other elections, the supposed threat that refugees here in America pose through terror-related activities. One of the right-leaning think tanks actually put out a study that said, it's more than a 1 in a billion chance here in America that you'll get killed by a refugee through terrorism. And I think we've all seen this week, and sadly every week, that there are terror threats here in the United States, but they don't come from refugees. And again, this is a truth that doesn't seem to make its way through the US discourse and the US narrative. And then sort of the third sort of question I wanted to pose to folks under this theme of refugees and asylum seekers is countries who host refugees. I think it's another great example of where if you look at the US media, there's very little fact. We actually point to Uganda as a case study of a country that does host an awful lot of refugees and does so in a fantastic way. And we work with some of the South Sudanese there at the border. But you would think here in the States that America has brought in 1 million South Sudanese refugees, the way they sometimes discourse wraps itself around the issue. Yeah, America is now down to, I think the cap was 30,000 a year. You know, the big refugee hosting countries, and I'm sure folks know it, are Pakistan, Uganda, Iran. So those are kind of 3 case studies where one of the things that IRC increasingly has to do now is spend its resources fighting to get facts into those debates. We find it increasingly difficult. We find it that there is a cohort who you might call kind of progressive activists who want to hear those facts. And then, and I think that, I'm sure this has come across your work, Olga, but we really do come up against the bias that people have, that if they have their opinion, you offer them a fact, it actually drives them further into their opinion. And so we've had to shift into storytelling for people who we know are naturally going to be against the refugee-based facts that we're offering them. So those are just a few of the challenges that we face through the lens of communications at the IRC. I would reiterate, we're 95% a humanitarian programming organization. That's what we do. But we found ourselves having to grow our efforts at influencing media narratives around the world. And I guess the question I have for folks in the room is, how do we bring some of that proportionality around humanitarian crisis, around what a refugee is, around where true threats are within your country, around who is actually doing the heavy work of hosting millions of refugees? How do we bring some of that proportional truth back to reporting in the US media, but also the Western media, with scarce resources and a very frayed media environment? And I saw here that, George, you're going to give us a postscript on the health of journalism around the world, and I think that should definitely speak to that.
Right here.
That issue. But there are a ton more examples, but those are just ones I wanted to bring up. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oliver. So for my understanding, Oliver just had about 2 or 3 questions for you guys. So if we...
Oliver, but what does since the IRC has so much expertise in this area and does so much work in this area, do you as an organization do anything in the media to explain what's happening, explain who these people are, and let's say how difficult it could be for them, but also how successful they have become in integrating into different communities?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we do it where we can. Interestingly, we find that local level media in America is very, very open to that type of reporting.
Right.
And so if we have successful business women in Boise who came here from DRC, they see that actually as kind of the American dream.
Sure.
And it's at the local and regional level of US media, we find people to be very open to a less politicized conversation around those stories. And we find a lot more, I think we're more successful at changing minds, at demonstrating refugee success in their communities. At the the national level, it's very, very difficult. I think that for the sort of New York Times, Washington Post, there's so much pressure on those editors, I think, to have the political bent on that. Even some of that classic storytelling can't be done in a neutral way. You've then, it's sort of added to with, but the right-wing think tank says this and the left-wing think tank says this. I don't think that's because they're trying to obscure the truth. I just think they have huge pressures there, and they are very, very audience-driven. And I think it's not what their audience wants. Unfortunately. But they are great partners where they can, but I know that the editors are shrinking that space all the time.
Thank you, Oliver.
Both the speakers excellent. I welcome your observations, either of you. So about 3 years ago, the New York Times introduced its, I guess at the time they call it virtual reality storytelling, but it was really more just immersive stuff. It was called The Displaced, and it took you inside 3 different refugee camps, and you were able to see firsthand what it would be like to be in those camps. And it was very engaging. But there hasn't been a lot since then. So I think part of the problem is that as news media have seen the resources shrink, it's very hard to do international stories. It's very expensive. It's also very dangerous. You talk about Yemen. It would be great to be able to do more journalism from Yemen, but it's a very dangerous place to be. And journalists already, we heard earlier today, twice as much at risk as they were a decade ago. So, fewer journalists, they're at high risk, and in many of the places you're talking about, getting access is not easy. There aren't going to be many Western reporters who can get into Iran to do a story about refugees, for example. So, that's part of the challenge. So if either of you have ideas on how journalists could get better access, more affordable access, safer access to do some of these stories about refugees, because just do them remotely, there aren't many quality news organizations that are going to want to do that. If they're going to do the story, they want to send people and be able to do it well, but it's expensive. And then they want to do it in a way that will engage the public. So using some of these new immersive tools and things of that nature, but it's expensive. And maybe there's collaborative possibilities, things like that could offset the cost, but enable more quality journalism on an important story.
In philanthropic media. I don't really know how I feel about it because on one part you get these organizations that that have the budgets to do that. Sometimes it's a little unclear who's funding it, and they don't get a huge amount of eyeballs or audience, but they tell fantastic, in-depth foreign reporting. And so, IRC often has to weigh up some of those, philanthropic media opportunities. Do we go to our teams on the ground and say, can we bring this journalist in? Can you take time out of your schedule to do this? So one is, I think that's an interesting growth area, that there are philanthropists who are just saying, we're going to fund this work ourselves. The problem is, are people then seeing it? The second is, with this new tranche of digital media companies that are opening up, sort of Vox or Quartz or kind of digital first news reporting groups, their standards are a little looser around what they might accept from the IRC. And so what that means is we could send them photos from Yemen or from Idlib, and they'll run them. Whereas, say, the Times might say, no, we understandably, they have a higher bar for material that they'll publish. So we're finding in that digital space, there are some organizations who are willing to do a little more collaboration on the product with NGOs. Of course, the big answer is everyone pays a lot more for the New York Times, and they send their cracking reporters, well insured and with security, out to some of these places as well. That would be great, but yeah. I mean, there's no doubt that one of the things that we've been able to do is take journalists to Uganda and take them to Mbepi and take them to the border and to try and tell the story there. But you need countries like Uganda who are willing to host journalists as well. But, yeah.
Thank you, Albert. Minister, would you like to add something?
Thank you very much. But now that you talk about international reporting, personally, there is always this lingering question of is there free lunch? Which organization offers free lunch? The old English adage that he who pays the piper calls the tune. So the more advanced, the more prestigious the paper, the costlier, the more control the political authorities, cultural authorities, or the editorial authorities, which are aligned to the government of the day, determine the direction of the media. Now, your group, much as they may actually have the reality and the truth, nobody wants to look at them. Nobody wants to look at them. It's like when a minister from Uganda of Justice and Constitution talks, nobody pays him attention. He's just something. Although he may have the best of facts, nobody listens to him because he's from Uganda. When somebody says something not exactly very intelligent, but is from one of these superpowers, it will be published. So, madam, here is your reality vis-a-vis objectivity and what we feed the population on. Reporting, this is a very clear example. We have 1.5 million refugees. We have hosted 1.5 million refugees from Sudan, from Somalia, from the Congo, some from Burundi. 1.5 million refugees. and we are not deploying 15,000 troops at this point.
And you have a very small country.
And our country is smaller than California. But we are comfortable. We are comfortable, relatively comfortable with those refugees. Yes, they are an inconvenience. They are an inconvenience, but they are found at their level within the objective conditions of Uganda, and we accept them as our African people, because they are called Sudanese because somebody drew a line, a border, without our consent. The southern border of Sudan was drawn someplace I don't even know, because we've got, for instance, at our border with Rwanda, we've got a family where a man has 2 wives. One is in Rwanda, one is in Uganda. Now we ask, what are the children? Are they Rwandese? Are they Ugandan? You know, same thing happens on the Sudanese border. We have actually speaking people in Luo-speaking people in Sudan and Luo-speaking people in Uganda. And when they come in, you know, you don't know who is Sudanese and who is. Some of them are slightly darker than we are. You know, that you don't know who is Sudanese and who is, and we are comfortable. Now, this is. I am saying this in relation. I don't want to. You know, I'm not at liberty to talk like the way he does. I wish I. I'm not saying. Well, I thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Minister. Any other questions? Yes, please.
The IRC and the 3 countries that you said are really hosting all of these refugees, and limited resources to get that story out. Intuitively, you would think that that kind of story is a PR story. My question, I guess, is whether or not that story can be gotten out better by paid media as opposed to free media. And to that end, I was wondering, and I don't know, if those 3 countries are friendly enough to get together to fund that media. I know Iran could use some good PR right about now, and so could Pakistan. So that's my question, is there any way that they could cooperate, because they are the 3 that are doing it, put some money together to fund a paid campaign and get above the web noise? That's kind of the problem. When you're trying to do it free, there's a lot of noise on the web. And to get above it takes some scratch.
A few things it makes me, a few things come to mind. I think the first is, in some ways that does happen, I guess, but through, I don't know if you call it earned media, but, you know, certainly in the UK, for example, you have an organization like Russia Today, who might do much longer segments and much more extensive reporting on a different perspective about these things. And I think in in some of the freer media regulation societies, you'll see countries running their own news services, and that's a way where you see some of those stories pop up more. Obviously, the Qataris and the Al Jazeera network it's a sort of example of that, but it's not those particular countries who are doing the hosting, but it's people who might spend more of their resources telling that story for whichever reasons. I think, and then just another comment would be, and I'll let the minister ask whether, you know, how you'd go about winning the budget for that in a big government debate. But the other point I would just say, which also agrees with you, is the changes to Facebook's algorithms and other social media platforms that we see, IRC, have dramatically reduced our reach to just post something for free. In the last year or two, to achieve the kind of reach we were getting on a platform like Facebook, we're actually having to spend out of our marketing budget. And so that's a sort of question that even the small institution relative to like the Iranian government, we're having to see that there's less space to do free stuff that cuts through. You have to pay, and so it's not. I don't think. I think it's a really legit question, and I'm sure at a strategic level, it may be happening, but I defer.
No, it's not only pay. Even the social media. Some social media organizations like Facebook, like which is the other one. Me, I'm BBC. I was born before computer, so I'm not very educated in social media. But I hear social media. I also read. Often putting out statements like, "We are not going to accept this kind of thing. We are struggling to contain this." Now, the end game is, how much are you editing out? In the process of editing out what is offensive, is there no possibility of editing out what you don't agree with? Especially when you are targeting a certain market, which market is under the control of somebody who does not accept the kind of information you broadcast. You see, there is that danger. And because of social media, we, the consumers, have no access to the origin of the information that is posted on the media. So, what guarantee do I have that what you put on social media has not been edited and actually skewed what you intended to put across? There is also that problem. It starts with offensive language, cyber harassment, offensive language, this, ad infinitum, ad absurdum, all in the name of profit. You see, for as long as there is that profit medium and pursuit, we, the consumers, and the contributors will find it difficult to get our ultimate objectives. See, there is that danger.
Thank you very much.
Again. So I didn't mention earlier, I'm also a photographer and I'm into the media, obviously. Like I said, I'm a researcher, so I'm really into anthropology, genetics, migrations, looking at how we are all interrelated. So I think the minister made a good point in that what affects Africa affects everyone. For my students, I am an adjunct professor in a few universities, and I always tell my students, I study this stuff, I'm a researcher, I'm somewhat into sciences. Everyone came from Africa. We are all Africans. We migrated and we evolved differently many centuries ago, but we're all African. Okay, so if we understand that maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually what affects Africa affects everyone. So we have to be very mindful, especially us in the West, on how we brand, how we present Africa to the world, how we brand, how we present minorities in America to other Americans, with police brutality, with the shootings that happen, with even the veterans, the way they're being portrayed when they come back home. All those things lead to suicide, many things happening that we may not necessarily hear that much in the news or shown in a way that, it's helped create social change. So we have pointed out earlier how about paid media, lots of grassroots organizations, lots of organizations that really care about development work like I do, will actually be willing to, for nothing, help collaborate with big news organizations for free just to have a platform for their well-researched news to be heard. So this is not a matter of having a budget. It's not a matter of one country paying the other. These are genuine people. Lots of students would be happy to have that platform just to be heard, just to help their local community in the Bronx, just to help that local community in Rwanda, just to help that local community in Bosnia, okay? So, and a lot of those things ties into, like I mentioned earlier, about integration. We all need each other. Scientists, media people need economists. Economists need people that are out there in the society, those activists. We all need each other. So, and another thing I see is usually you have business people. I have an MBA in 2 areas. Okay, so business people tend to be in business conversations only, but not in social conversations like we're having today, and what impacts human beings. I was in a cab yesterday, well, I think it was yesterday. Someone was asking me about the albino killing in South Africa, or you heard this in South Africa. I'm like, does it happen? I believe there's truth to it, that it does happen. I happen to be Nigerian, I'm Igbo. We have the most albinos in the world. We do not kill albinos. But this is what he remembers of Africa. And I said to him, we have to be careful of what we remember about other countries. I happened to be at the Borough College. Someone was talking about our organizations help with prostitution, about child trafficking. There's a lot of writing going on in, I believe, India. And was saying, oh, they help with that. Great, you putting this out in the news. You are getting funding from corporations. Oh, this is what we're doing, this is how we're helping. You put out news, but I wonder, what are you doing to really solve the problem? Yeah, you might be buying back the children, but that society is in a bigger issue, it's a bigger economic issue. What would make a father want to sell his daughter? So the parents actually, what would make a parent want to sell his daughter? What are we doing as the international community? What are we doing as local community? What are we doing as human beings of the world? We're all the same people to help in creating better society that this does not have to happen. So it comes down to the fact that, okay, you have people like the minister mentioned earlier on, you have people throwing themselves away in boats to come to America, for slavery really in America. You come in here, you don't have your papers, you don't have anything, your life is probably more horrible than you have in African country, but you have this image created by the media in your mind that guess what, it's better in America. And you don't mind risking yourself to die in America. And also, with the media, we really need to pay attention to the fact that when it's back to the way we brand people in these communities, everyone, I'm pretty sure, I mean, in lots of areas, will not doubt that Africans, minorities, especially of African descent, whom have not been necessarily portrayed well in the media, are really good in art. I am an artist, natural born artist, I'm very tough, you know. And one thing I know I'm really into is about technical education, engineering, computer science. I find that by talking to my students, they are really good in technology, naturally good in technology, naturally good in computer science. What are we doing as the media to promote these areas? Because we know computer science is a great equalizer, especially for African youth. Guess what? They're great in computer science, they know how to hack, they might not have the American degrees, but they know how to do this, and it doesn't cost that much to provide internet. We have to let them, give them that platform in the Western world. Give those people in Brooklyn, those kids in Brooklyn, the platform in the New York Times, maybe community organizations, right, to do something. So I wonder what you have to say about this.
Thank you. As all of us belong to Africa originally, well, this is modern thinking. But all I know is that we are all apes. We originate from the apes. Well, the apes were in Africa, studied in Africa, or they studied elsewhere and moved to Africa and came back. I don't know, and I don't want to be involved with that debate. I want to leave that to the anthropologists and the biologists. What I'm talking about is contemporary Africa. And the subject for today is truth and reality. Like I said before, there is no free lunch. The corporations you are talking about pay to support these media houses for purposes of profit. Profit is meant to improve the quality of being, of living on earth, to make you a better person, to ease your existence on earth. So when you talk about African students getting exposed to the internet and so forth, no, that's not enough. The internet is a discovery of somebody, some brain work. What is the result? The result of the brain work of the African who has been exposed to this technology. We are very good at copying and maintaining. Where is our originality? You who are young, me, I'm on BBC. I was born before computer. It's here. I'm living when it's being introduced. Where is your originality? You are talking about the internet. The internet is a discovery of somebody who sat down and put in effort, brain work, brain power, to work out the algorithm of the internet. Where is the originality? Why aren't African students making those pursuits? And if they are, where are they? Who benefits from these inventions? That's what is important. Now, if there are people benefiting from your brain power, what is your return demand on the governments of Africa that they should promote? Because we, the governments of Africa, together, we can promote some of these undertakings, endeavors. Why do you allow us to be busy promoting sovereignty? Sovereign Uganda, sovereign Kenya, sovereign South Africa, sovereign. Sovereignty in poverty is poverty of sovereignty. Young lady, nobody listens to the poor. You can shout on top of your voice. If you are a poor person, nobody will listen to you. No, but Africa is not poor. Africa is divided. If we were to put together, put our resources together, which should be your quest now as young people, because my generation cannot do it anymore. If your generation could do it, bring together the resources of Africa, in order to promote some of these scientific excellencies, which will make you competitive with the rest of mankind on Earth. So where is this demand? Where is this drive by the young people on the governments? That's what I would like to hear from you people. When I started growing up, while lamenting, oh, we can't do this, oh, we can't do this. I was born into the lamenting age. I've lived in the lamenting age. I am going to die dissatisfied. What am I leaving behind? What are you telling me? What are you telling me that I should go with hope that the people I've left behind will do better than I was able to do?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
The woman behind you.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Thanks so much. We hear a lot, read a lot in newspapers about, this is a question for Minister Otapieri, we hear a lot about the torture of opposition figures in Uganda, Bobby Wine and so on, the famous musician, and of course many others. And I wonder how confident can we be in that the 2021 elections will actually be free and fair in Uganda. And I have a second question also, which is about refugees, which Uganda has rightly been praised for caring for. But Uganda's army also meddles in many of the countries from which these refugees have fled. And I'm wondering if sometimes Uganda's army isn't, in some cases, fueling the very fires that it's also being praised for managing the victims of. You know what I mean?
I didn't get quite what you said before.
We hear a lot about...
Use the microphone, put it on your ear.
Yeah, all right. We hear a lot about the mistreatment and torture of opposition figures, political opposition figures in Uganda, particularly Bobby Wine, the famous musician and member of parliament. We also hear about the, and other opposition figures. And I'm wondering, to what extent can we be confident that the 2021 elections in Uganda will be free and fair? And the second question is that Uganda has been, while Uganda has been rightly praised for caring for so many refugees in the region, Uganda's army is also involved in some of those conflicts in South Sudan, for example, according to the United Nations, and has also, of course, been involved in Congo on and off over the years. And I'm wondering, how do you reconcile that? Even in 2005, the International Court of Justice ordered Uganda to pay $10 billion in reparations to Congo for war crimes committed there.
Piece of plant from
And so
somewhere.
how do you as a Minister of Justice reconcile these contradictions in Ugandan politics and regional developments and so on?
Well, thank you very much. In 2005, well, Madam, I happen to have been the military officer in charge of the Congo expedition. I was the one in charge of the Ugandan troops in the Congo.
Okay.
I was the, the officer in charge of the expedition in the Congo.
From when to when?
From 98
Yeah,
to 2003.
I see.
Yes,
In Ituri.
I was the officer in charge of the military expedition in the Congo. And I can assure you that none of us ever took anything from the Congo. The conflict was between two powerful forces who were fighting for resources in the Congo and using us as pawns. I am a poor man.
Okay.
They said that we stole gold and diamond, and I couldn't tell. Well, before I went to the Congo, I couldn't tell the difference between one stone and the other. How could I prosecute a war at the same time mine for gold? Can you do it? Can you fight and also dig for gold? Please, this is exactly what we're discussing. If there was so much to steal in the Congo, how come some of the poorest people I've seen on earth are in the Congo? If there was so much to steal, plenty everywhere, how come some of the poorest people, the destitute of the world, are in that place? No roads, no water, no houses, no education, nothing. And yet there was plenty to steal. Please, I would like to invite you to come down and look at the situation in the Congo yourself. You talked about the torture of Bobby Wine. Yes, Bobby Wine. Now, after torturing Bobby, he came here, but he's back in Kampala. If he had been tortured, why did he remain here as a refugee? He left on his own, he came back on his own. And he's there, he's a member of parliament. If you are tortured, when you are hurt by government, troops, security officials, authorities, you go to court. Our courts are functioning. I have not seen Bobby Wine sue the Attorney General or sue me, the minister, both in my capacity as an individual and as minister, for compensation. That's the narrative. Bobby Wine was tortured. Huh? You see, the picture people present to the Western world and the reality on the ground are different. They are very, very, very different. Because if I came to America and I was tortured in America, would I come back? Surely, a member of parliament, is arrested and tortured, and then he leaves, he goes for treatment. He goes for treatment after he's been badly tortured. He comes back after 1 week. He's in parliament, he's debating, and he was tortured. Honestly, give us a break. I challenge anybody who says Bobby Wine was tortured, Bobby Wine was injured, Bobby Wine is hospitalized, to come to Kampala and see Bobby Wine running around, jumping up and down and holding concerts and singing like he used to do. Yes, we quarrel, we will have a few skirmishes here and there, and also push them off the street, but that does not constitute torture, that does not constitute cruelty on the part of the Uganda government. I say no. As for the elections of 2021, if we hold not free and not fair elections, how come we always win by 51, 54? Why don't we get overwhelming majority? I lost my seat in parliament. I lost my seat in parliament. Only and honestly, I'm not a very small man. If elections were so unfree, so unfair, how come I didn't win? So, elections in Africa are only free and fair when the opposition wins. We lose. I lost my seat. I'm in government as by grace of the president, because I'm still useful. But I lost my seat. The people, the voters, just looked at me and said, "We are tired of this man's face. Let him retire." And they sent me home. Well, I don't know whether they knew what they were doing. That's a different matter altogether. But the elections in Uganda in 1921 shall be free and fair, because we have learned our lessons. We've seen the result of unfree and unfair elections. We've learned our lessons. We had that experience. We had a civil war over it, and anybody who went through that experience, for as long as we are still alive, we are not going to accept it again. That mistake can only be made by our successors. We are prepared to conduct free and fair elections and to go home when we lose. But for as long as the people of Uganda still vote us in majority, we are not going to remove ourselves from responsibility of serving our people. If you want that kind of arrangement, try elsewhere, not in Uganda. No. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Minister Awakandala, I promised you, so thank you so much.
I was actually surprised when you were saying that Facebook's new, whatever, how they do things is to basically reduce the support for nonprofits being able to advertise at a reduced cost, you know, especially in light of the fact of all the controversy about Facebook, you know, and being fair and things like that. And it's, first of all, it's very disappointing, but also, this is another thing, I think, people have no idea this is going on, you know, and I would imagine some of the billions of whoever are on Facebook would have a feeling, would have feelings about this, you know, and post things about it. The question is, how does that get put out there?
But majority of the people on Facebook, those on Facebook, they're in an entirely different world. Their interests are different from what we are discussing here, and they are happy. It's those of us who have allocated ourselves the responsibility to awaken social consciousness that realize that the shortcomings of Facebook. Because if you take my college son and daughter, Facebook is just for an entirely different world altogether. They are worried about who, you know, gossip and what and where, which party is where, the following day. And but as to philosophy, the number of philosophers on Facebook is very limited. These other fellows who are the billions are in their own, listen to their own echo chamber. They are within their own echo chamber. They talk to themselves. They don't talk to us. They talk to themselves. They don't talk to us. And please, I don't understand them. Even when I try to get in, I could be in China. I could be in Honolulu. I don't understand the language they talk, and I don't speak their language, and they don't want to understand what I'm saying. I'm a bore.
What the person from IRC? What is?
It's really interesting. Just very briefly, I would say it's not that Facebook were giving advantageous marketing pricing to NGOs and then took it away. It's universal pricing, and they have a free market model, but that there were two ways that you could get your content out.
Right.
One would be just like anyone here who's on Facebook firing out a post, and it sort of is just naturally seen.
Right.
Like, yeah. And then the other one is you pay for an ad. And the first one, the reach of that has just become very small. So if you really want to reach more people, you just have to pay more. And so it's not so, yeah. So it sort of rounds back to the original question of, you know, I'm thinking, no, don't post that on Facebook because that'll be fake news and it'll be around the world before we're off.
I didn't say that.
No. So yeah, I do think it's totally legitimate to say, should NGOs, get certain rates, and should we have our advertising very quickly processed? Because at the moment, if there's something terrible like false reporting on the caravan, and we want to put out a video and disprove it with facts on Facebook, our content is now considered political, and so it has to get reviewed by a human being. So we can be like 12 hours, and the news cycle's gone on like that. So there are all sorts of ways that Facebook can do more for us. We'll always say that, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
But Madam, you talked of the caravan. I don't know whether I'm stupid or, but how do 100,000 people from different areas of Latin America suddenly find themselves together, march in tandem, like an army. They don't die of starvation. They work together. They rest together. And from the pictures I've seen on television, they are not malnourished. They are not sick. Is there something wrong with me, or?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that IRC has done is we have sent an assessment team to try and answer some of those questions. So I don't know the answer to them, but we've sent a team to try and spend time with that group and to say, you know, what motivated you to take the, you know, to take what's a risky journey. I mean, one thing that we do know is that if you're traveling north through Mexico, it's alone or in like a small group, it's incredibly dangerous. And so at least a year or two ago, people started traveling in larger groups because of the safety. But what you're certainly right about is there's an awful lot that isn't known about those groups and why they're in the numbers they are. But that's one of the things that IRC wants to try and do is dig into some of those facts. Definitely.
100,000.
Yeah.
It's not right.
As you said, feed themselves along the way, have been the helpful people that have come and brought food.
Also, there are fewer numbers.
The last news report that I just looked up said there are between 4,000 and 5,000 people. So it's a much more manageable group, and they're getting support from the communities that they travel through.
Okay. And we are deploying 15,000. That's 3 to 1.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's another ridiculous situation.
Well.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. Thank you, Oliver. Thank you, everyone. And I will ask Dr. Lucian